this Born in the USA, again, is one of those great songs, but they always play it at the ballparks and during the games, but they won't play the whole damn song because it's not a happy song.
Yeah. Great. There are some just great albums from back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I always talk to people who say that music has gotten worse nowadays, but it's just different.
I don't know about
that.
Worse. I think it's different, and we don't have everybody, just one type of.
I hear you.
You sound good.
Of genre.
Want to go a tiny bit louder?
Two.
Anybody.
That's good. Thanks.
In a way, it's potentially better because you don't need studio executives making decisions about what's good and what isn't. Who knows how much great stuff we had, but they just didn't have the vision.
There's no gatekeepers anymore.
Yeah.
You can just put out whatever you want to put out.
Right, and it floats to the top unless people are dumb, but that can happen too. But
it's the whole George Carlin thing, right?
Yeah.
It happens a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, what we gravitate towards as people, especially nowadays, some of the videos that are out there that gain traction. I don't know if you guys know the Hawk Tour girl.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that just blows up.
Yeah, but the problem is that now you got to be good looking as well, for the most part.
Do you think that's a requirement?
Well, because they're on video now. People used to become famous for their music before they were on television. So it's there's even a meme about that. Back in the day when ugly people can be be rock stars, but I think if you're that good, you can still make it. But
it's definitely easier to fake if you've got the looks, because you can kind of coast by a little bit more. People are like, all right, we'll listen to this guy. But if the music sucks, I think it catches up to you eventually.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of flash in the pan people that way.
Like the whole influencer thing, and also, TikTok algorithm being based on how much people are pushing, how much other people are, the geometric progression of how things are getting circulated. I think looks have a lot to do with people's, hey, look at this.
Yeah.
It's appealing. It's not required.
It definitely helps.
It's like, it's wind in the sails.
Yeah. Do you want to pull that sucker just a little bit closer? You want to keep it within a fist of your mouth.
Okay.
You can move it around wherever it's comfortable.
Okay. Is that better?
Yep.
Cool.
Perfect.
I do love, though, that I can find any genre, Brazilian punk rock, and, you get a whole bunch of stuff right on there, right? It's just like, you don't have to go to a store like the old days.
Yeah, you definitely have a new ease of access element at play, which sometimes is not great. I always fall back on my algorithm for whatever reason, probably because I'm interested in it, has just consistently shown me videos of the war in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Just unbelievable drone videos of people in troop carriers just getting blown up, individuals dodging them.
I've been watching
Russians
it too.
headbutting drones.
Yeah.
I can't pull my eyes away.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep scrolling.
Yeah. I know. I'd say, it's weird too. Because they're not supposed to show death of people, but people are dying if they drop something on a tank and the tank goes on fire. People are dying inside. So what's the difference? But
yeah, you see something blow up and you're that close to it.
Yeah,
I don't like your odds.
Yeah.
I don't think you're making it out of that one.
Yeah.
And I believe Meta has a policy against that level of violence, but they don't seem to care when it comes to these war videos.
Well, I mean, because it's reality. It's not gratuitous,
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff they do care about that is also reality and far less violent that they have no problem censoring.
Interesting.
I mean, I've had some of my videos pulled just for conversations around sensitive topics.
Oh.
I was alluding to that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we were talking about with Inter News.
Yeah.
The heavy hand of censorship. Which, speaking of which, so we started with Inter News. That's what we were discussing prior to your arrival. I wasn't aware.
By the way, when are we starting?
We're going right now.
Yeah, that's the way he does it.
I just do a rolling start.
He just does a rolling start. I guess we should probably introduce ourselves.
Yeah, we can do that. Do you guys want to say who you are, where you guys are from?
I mean, my name is Eric Kirk, and we do Redwood Wonk together on Access Humboldt.
So my name is David Frank, and I have a show on KMUD, Redwood Community Radio down in Redwood's Community Radio down in Redway, and it's called You Are Here. So it's a public affairs show where we basically talk about where we are, where we want to be, and how we get there. That's kind of how I met Eric.
Yeah.
Through the K-Mud community. And then he invited me to be co-host of his show, one of the shows.
All Things Reconsidered. Oh, you mean one of these shows?
Yeah.
I do All Things Reconsidered on K-Mud. It's about trying to reevaluate basic assumptions and critical thinking and all of that. But that's how I got invited to do the university station back in the day, and then we got invited to, or I got invited off to do a show on Access Humboldt, and then Dave came along one day.
2 years ago. Yeah. I couldn't remember who it was that was no longer your co-host, and I was a guest co-host. Then I've been more of a fixture since then.
How long have you been doing Redwood Wonk?
Oh, since the university shut down KHSU and turned it into a zombie station.
Which was, this was a long time ago.
It's before the pandemic, yeah, about a year, maybe 2018. I'm forgetting exactly when it was.
Yeah, I wasn't around for the HSU radio station days, but I heard that they were pretty great. A lot of community members were pretty sad that went away.
Oh yeah. It's a big shame. There was a lot of deep talent on that, and they're finding their way on other stations, Access Humboldt, and other places. Some of them that want to do it. Others were happy to retire.
Yeah, it's challenging to be in a small market like this, I would imagine, and still, especially if you're local to a school like that. I don't know what the funding situation would look like.
For Access Humboldt?
No, for the HSU radio station.
It was mostly paid for by the university. It did draw in money from donors and people doing underwriting and the rest, but it was a cash loss as they looked at it. Although you would think that they did not enough students were involved. And I actually thought that was a legitimate criticism. I thought they should have brought in more students, cleared up some time to do shows, maybe less network programming. But they didn't, and they decided that was a place they can cut, just like they cut the museum or the art place in downtown Eureka. The new leadership just didn't have a concept of a university being part of a community, and that these things. They almost shut down the Natural History Museum. Thank God.
Oh, did they really? They tried to do that?
They were thinking about it. But,
wow. And they got rid of the football team, which a lot of people have
varying
opinions on that.
Right.
Is President Jackson, he has since stepped down?
He's gone. Or he's stepped down. He's
in the process of
He's
leaving.
Still being paid as a professor. I don't know if he's doing any classes or anything like that. But there were a couple of things that he did wrong in how he handled the demonstrations.
Were you guys following that? Did you guys discuss that on Redwood Wonk at all?
No, we did. No, Redwood Wonk, we focused on national politics mostly, but I focused on, I did some stuff, and actually I went up to the university and when the demonstrations were happening, when we were supposed to not be in the university, but I saw, Mike Wilson there and other figures in town. We were all up there, but the Redheaded Black Belt did an incredible job of covering that, and I thought they did really well. And there's a lot to talk about there. But
yeah, we were talking a little bit about Israel-Palestine off air, and that is just such a nuanced issue for sure, but such a hot topic.
It's complicated
because you can't go into it without any emotion right now. People are either charged towards Israel or Palestine, and the middle ground is getting real fuzzy there.
Well, one of the things that I didn't actually mention earlier, which is very relevant, I think, is that when I first got the radio showdown on K-Mud, I told one of my colleagues who is a leader in the Middle East, North Africa project community that I was going to be doing shows. And I said, maybe I can talk to you about this issue. I've got some ideas. And she basically said, how many researchers do you have? And I said, none. She's like, what's your staff look like? I said, it's just me. She's like, just do me a favor. Don't talk about that issue till you've had a show for about 10 years and you build up trust in the community, because it is a thankless topic to talk about. People are so entrenched, and the consequences of the ripple out of your words could ruffle feathers in a way that It's really anything you think you could contribute to the conversation may actually just come back to hurt you so badly that it wasn't worth you trying. And that was really sad from somebody whose life was committed to improving communities around the Middle East.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been
including
slammed.
That specific problem where they lived.
Yeah, that's disappointing to hear that.
On my show, I've been slammed both as a Zionist stooge and a pro-terrorist person for saying the same things. It's like I support the two-state solution. Neither side, or a bunch of people on both sides, don't want to deal with that, and it's really, really hard. I'm a Zionist. I'm pro-terrorist for embracing the,
which is an interesting dichotomy to be. You can be both of those at the same time.
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if I was in part of the Irgun or something during the 1930s, right? But
you said it, not me.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, of course.
Yeah. It's one of those topics where you would want to promote discussion, even if you don't have a show that's 10 years old and you're just stepping into the field. I don't think that more discussion is necessarily a bad thing. It just provides more opportunity for people to wade through the information. I mean, even if you're saying something that's not true, people can hear that and say, this doesn't sound right. And that might provoke them to go do further research and actually dive into the issue. I mean, I went in blind. I had a professor on from UC Berkeley and one out of the University of New South Wales, I believe, in Australia. Both had been studying the Middle East, had been advocates on the issue forever. Both were Jewish. Both could not have further opinions on the topic. One was a pro-Israel stance and one was a pro-Palestine stance. And it's just, you need that. You need to hear these voices.
So you can be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, by the way.
You can. That's not the dichotomy of the pro-terrorist stance, but...
I mean, there's a couple elements that are worth mentioning here. One is that there are vested interests and the costs and consequences are immense. So that the conversation is constrained or channeled or, let's just use a vague term, propaganda. There's propaganda around messaging for longer term goals, longer term aims. So that's one facet of the prism. But then, arguably the other thing is that if it was the case that it was something that was easy to talk about, people would be talking about it. It's really, really challenging to not offend. So, for example, Jews for Peace, where's their platform right now? They have a lot to say. We were at the Democratic Convention, California State Democratic Convention down in Sacramento. And we saw a panel. I'm not sure if you were in that room. I watched a panel of the Progressive Caucus speakers, and there were, several Jewish voices there that were speaking to the realities on the ground. That lane is the null set in mainstream media. So that's a third aspect of this is that. Not only do they sort of not have a lane necessarily, and there's lots of voices that don't have a lane, but also you've got, what is the purpose of, say, an MSNBC, a CNN, a Fox News like that? Those are cable channels. Those are businesses. They might be that fourth estate. They might have a functional role in our democracy in our country, but their priority is their profit. And then so we do have PBS, but PBS is beholden to taxpayers for their money, which means to the federal government, and so there's all sorts of reasons why it's hard to find voices. But like with this conversation right here, nobody is silencing you. We could talk about anything we want, but then the question is, what kind of amplification do we get? Just like our shows, what's our total viewing audience? Whose lives are we improving? So I've often said, I think there is a missing institution, and the missing institution is that which can kind of bring important messages, changing people's lives through conversations within the community where that trust can be across the table. But we're working on building those institutions like you are in your way and we are in our way. And I think that's kind of the optimistic reality is that we can have these conversations. But the question is the deliberation and the compromise and the implementation, like making these conversations translate to community governance, that's probably doable. Like at HSU, like you guys talked about, we heard last night I heard one of the city council members from Eureka saying, hey, well, when the Eureka police went and supported the call for help at Cal Poly, is HSU, but now it's Cal Poly Humboldt. They thought there was a memorandum of understanding, a formal one in place that said we have to support when we're asked. There wasn't. It was a handshake from history. It didn't exist. There's no understanding. There's no document. Well, when they went there, they were put in a very uncomfortable situation that was live broadcast, like Eric said earlier. So people got to see what happened. And those officers were put in a very difficult position.
They were also not legally informed. They cleared the media people, all the people that were there at 2 a.m. when they finally cleared the campus. They basically arrested one of them and pushed the others off. They don't understand that in California, even in a restricted area like that, as long as reporters don't get in the way, they have a right to be there. And those officers didn't know that. They said, well, you shouldn't be they said, my boss said that I have the right to be here, and your boss shouldn't be telling you to do illegal things. So whoever was in charge of that particular operation did not inform the officers that the media have the right to stay. And it makes it more dangerous for everyone when the media's not there. The media, everybody behaves on one side or the other, right? You don't want to get caught on, but if you feel like you can get away with something, you might. And so that was a really dangerous thing. And that was one of the things that Jackson came under a lot of scrutiny for. Also, things like using the term never again, which is really offensive.
Never again, I'm not familiar with.
Well, he said never again in reference to demonstrations, taking over buildings on campus, but it is the slogan of the people who survived the Holocaust, never again. And so he was trying to draw this comparison that these demonstrators were just as bad as Nazis, right? I mean,
do you think that was an intentional comparison he was trying to draw?
Yes, I do. He emphasized it, and several rabbis and a bunch of the Jewish community signed a statement later saying that was really inappropriate. So,
I watched a video of that reporter. I believe it was prior to her arrest, up to the arrest, and then she was speculating on, just recounting what had happened and her interaction with law enforcement at that point. And it was interesting to see. I don't know her name.
I don't remember it either. She worked for, I believe, the KC or whatever it was, and she was trying to inform them, and they didn't do it. And of course, they didn't press any charges, but she wasn't there to cover the actual arrest. There was some coverage because they didn't get everybody, but that some footage that made it onto the thing. But it was completely peaceful.
Peaceful until they start barricading themselves into it.
No, we're talking about the night of the final arrest at 2:30 in the morning. The initial one, that's why they brought in all the police, because there were probably about 30 students or something, 20 or 30, that managed to keep the officers out. And there were students that were wounded in that one, a couple of head injuries. I don't know if any officers were injured, but we all saw the water bottle, which became a meme.
Yeah, I don't know if he was injured from that officer, but there's a pride element that goes down when that video now lives out on the internet forever, and the world can see you get hit with a water jug trying to enter a library.
So
it's a nuanced subject, and there is the element like you were talking about. There's consequences to speaking on an issue that is that polarized.
Yep.
Regardless of what side you're trying to take or what point you're trying to prove. Even if you're just coming out and saying, hey, the escalation of this in the Middle East is not beneficial for anybody. Even if you take that stance, there's going to be people that, attach one side or the other to you and try to tear you down. So I think that definitely holds people back from speaking on the issue. Even those that maybe do have that background and have been working on this issue for their entire lives would realistically be afraid, because the idea that you can get some serious real life repercussions for speaking are real. There are examples of that.
Yeah. Well.
And I would just add that there are people who are extremely knowledgeable, disagree immensely with each other, have very little in common, and there's not a safe space for them to figure out if there's anything that they do agree on. And instead, it kind of I can't believe we're talking so long about this, but it devolves into these camps too, where there's just vested interests, like I said earlier. So, I mean, I don't want to pick on any particular journalist, but or scholar necessarily, but even I'll just take it from a different perspective. People don't even agree on what anti-Semitism is.
No.
And so there are organizations that specialize in making sure that this is an issue that gets attention, and that, policies are formulated around this issue. And their definitions are arguably suspect in many ways. We're definitely not doing this here, of course, but it's just, that doesn't help. It doesn't help that you can't say, I believe in supporting our ally, but I believe in my right to criticize their leaders. That alone is enough. You can't say, that's a hard thing for people to say, which is ironic in a country like ours where that free speech is sacrosanct. Like, we all criticize our leaders here. It's the one thing we have in common. I think you could go to any soccer game, or I joke around. You go to like the Thanksgiving table with your relatives. People are going to be throwing around some criticisms of social commentary, social analysis. Like, it's armchair version, but people are really thoughtful. People have strong opinions. If we can't be comfortable helping each other navigate the complexities of the world, then that says a lot about where we are. The polarization is like trench warfare right now, really.
Well, like Columbia University tried to put together a committee to combat anti-Semitism on it. And they tried to make it diverse, and they couldn't agree on a definition of anti-Semitism. So right out the gate, they couldn't do it. I mean, what we're missing, and this is broader than just the issue of the Middle East, is real forums for debate. And I don't mean arguing where one person gets their points off and the other person doesn't. Jon Stewart shut down the last show of that when he went on to Crossfire and criticized them. The show was canceled like a month later after he just said, "You guys aren't debating. You're just making noise, right? You're trying to win points with what you say in this half hour that were actually 20 minutes with the advertisements But what I do miss, and it was debates such as that Buckley did. And I'm not a fan of Buckley's politics at all. And he was an arrogant SOB, as we've learned. But he had on firing line, which he would have debates. He would debate people. And sometimes get his clock rung because somebody would know something. Yeah. And but then he put together, I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s, these team debates where he would have 4 experts on one topic and 4 on another, and they would each go on each other one-on-one. And it was like a 2-hour-long thing, and you had to know your stuff if you wanted to be effective on that. And it had to not just be about winning points. It had to be about, if you've got something you want to get across, you need to have a discussion with the other person, because that other person is an expert too. And sometimes he got it complicated. Like when they were talking about the war on drugs, it wasn't 4 liberals versus 4 conservative. He took 2 liberals who supported the war on drugs and 2 conservatives who supported, and then he was one of the conservative libertarians, and one other, along with Ira, what was his name, who was the head of the ACLU? And
Laser?
Yes, was up there, and it was kind of interesting because he's up against one of the liberals. It was a congressman of some sort, and the congressman kept saying, "And you agree with William Buckley that, and you agree with William Buckley that," and finally he says, "Hardly ever, by the way. We go off of this issue. I don't agree with him on much, but yes, we are in the same camp that the war on drugs."
I knew you were going to say that. I knew this was going to go there.
Yeah, it just it was really interesting though, because it provoked thought. Of course, National Review was a lot more interesting to read back then. It's now just kind of a rag, ideological rag. It doesn't, that's totally caught up in Trumpism, because if you didn't adopt Trump, you lose money. You lose readers. And so if you're at all critical of them, there are a few that are, but you talked about academics. I mean, a big turnaround. I used to have great respect for Thomas Sowell. But he used to break the party line all the time. He railed against the people with the bell curve, and the rest. And then he was a never Trumper until about a year into it, when he realized I better
fall in
line, and then he fell in line.
Didn't the House pass some resolution on anti-Semitism or criticizing Israel? You guys aware of that? This was a few months ago.
Yeah. It was one of those, hey, we just need a statement of support, and no one in the House is against supporting Israel. A handful of people might say we criticizing it, like, again, a very small percentage of them, the squad, and not even all of them probably, would say something like, I don't want to support this at all. But for the most part, that's 4 out of 430.
And even they wouldn't say, we don't think Israel should exist.
They would not.
They would not say that. No. They know that would be death to their,
Well, the term anti...
But no, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Almost no one says that, by the way.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That Israel
on Earth.
exist.
Yeah, they're very, people would say, well, there are obviously lots of Hamas, ridiculous extremists. Those people exist. But I'm saying
it is the
in thoughtful society, that sentiment doesn't exist.
But it is the implication, at least logically speaking, of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, in between the Jordan River and the Red Sea, that's all Israel and the Palestinian territories. What's called the western part of what was Mandate Palestine before they created the countries. And but I've talked to people who say, but that's not what it means. We just mean that Palestinians should have rights within that area, both in Israel and the rest. But it's a hard thing to explain when you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's one of those, slogans like defund the police, where right out the gate, you're trying to explain it. And also originally it did mean the destruction of Israel because it was Yasser Arafat who.
Yeah, but I don't know that a lot of the kids, these college kids nowadays that are spouting that, really understand that historical component.
No, they don't. They don't.
I think they mean it in terms of, we just want Palestinians to be free in that region.
Yeah.
So I recently had a conversation about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So totally separate concept. But what the other person, after we talked for a while, what the person said is, I bet you almost nobody knows the details of history in a way that informs their strong opinions about the little pieces of information that they receive in the present. And so it's easy to say it's awful the way the U.S. pulled out. That's easy to agree to.
Nobody's for that.
Yes, no, exactly. Nobody's
how
for
it panned out.
The way it panned out. Exactly. No one's for that last day, right? That last week, that last month. But if you look all the way back at how that withdrawal began, it's a little bit more complicated, of course. And I would say that that's any of these slogans, like what Eric said, just to change gears again, is the Black Lives Matter, the idea that whole thing is as polarizing as it is. To me, that's, we don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but like the polarization is in part because of a lack of leadership. The people that actually are leaders benefit from the polarization. And in fact, there's constituencies and there's agendas, and I find it actually pretty troubling that it's so hard for people to say, like, every community needs a well-funded, well-trained, and appropriately robust relationship between the citizens and the police. Everybody wants that in their communities, because damn straight, when your house is getting broken into or some arsonist is burning down your house, you want to have somebody to call, right? So that's real. But the idea that we need to acknowledge the history of our country and each and every decision that was made when it comes to how policing occurs, how zoning occurred, how civil rights played out over the generations of the 50 years of our existence. We didn't fully evolve from our original state in the Constitution of what our aspirations were, what our vision was. We didn't get there yet. So it's entirely appropriate to say, let's make sure we reassess from time to time how we can make incremental progress based on where we are. Every time we see something happen that is offensive, like somebody getting choked to death on camera, that's a good time to reflect. Does the leadership exist to explain what we ought to do with that new information? I would say it's unfortunately a pox on both your houses. It's really hard to see people that actually have a sense of context that is going to like. Right. That's why there's so much depression in the another topic, but like huge percentages of children are clinically dangerously, tragically depressed. Meaning they fail the depression battery. They answer the questions. You go through the depression battery. They have real reasons to wonder if the future is going to be better. And that's again, it's a sore subject, I think, for me. But if people would have the courage to speak truthfully, even if they disagree with each other, have the courage to say what it is that they think is the reality on the ground and what ought to be done, and acknowledging the past, that brings it all together with like dignity and respect for each other. And I think that that's we could go whichever direction you choose to go on that, but that's the similarity between if we're talking about the Palestine-Israeli conflict, or we're talking about the U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan, or we're talking about defund the police as one of the most difficult slogans to justify on earth, even though it's coming from the right place. If you talk to the people in Oakland, who that's where that came from, they believe that's a really important. They embrace the controversy.
Some of them do. Not all of them. Some of them say we're in these poor communities. We need those police, So it's
that's also true. Huh?
It depends on how you do it. But when you have to explain right out of the gate that defund doesn't mean defund.
Oh, you're off to a bad start.
Correct.
It's terrible branding. It's terrible branding, and the problem is some people, when they do say that, that's what they mean.
Some people do. Yeah.
Abolish the police.
Okay, so that's the thing. These are complicated issues. All of these, and I'm glad to have met you today. We're diving right into the hardest things to talk about in the world. If you believe it to be the case, Sheriff Hansel himself has said publicly, and it's written in the journal, different newspapers in our community. I'm not sure which one I read it in. But he said, if you're going to take mental health crisis response off of the plate of my sheriffs and you're going to give it to a specialized force, you can have some of my budget to fund that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he's unique in any way, that there are other things where the police department doesn't even need to be the first responder, doesn't need to have a primary jurisdiction over a problem.
Great. I don't know if you were here years ago when the woman was killed in Old Town.
Right.
It was, and it was a controversy. And the police, first of all, a guy who knew her was trying to hand the police a phone saying, I've got her on the phone here. And they were like, no, just back away. And it's like, no, here's an opportunity to talk to her. Right. And they basically, when they made the decision to break down the door and go in there, they had decided they were going to kill her because there's no way. She did not have the capacity to comply. They said, well, she should have just complied. She did not have that capacity. She was hyper anxious, and so she grabbed her flare gun and they shot her to death. If there had been a trained special, mental health care or, health team that specializes in that with training as both police and that, every jurisdiction should have one of those. How many lives will it save? It won't save everything. They can't. There's some things that nobody can do if you're gone on drugs or something like that. But you de-escalate. I mean, that's the whole emphasis, is to de-escalate. That needs to be like on the written on the foreheads of every law enforcement officer with a gun, because they put their own lives in danger. So as well.
I think we just have a fundamental issue with definitions of the words that we throw around nowadays. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially one of the things that has been fascinating for me to see about whether it's defund the police or especially with Israel-Palestine, if you look at what anti-Semitism means today, or anti-Semite. In some ways, I feel like that's the new racist. I mean, racist was thrown around so heavily and used as just a blanket catch-all to shut down any discussion that you disagreed with, mm-hmm. that it almost lost a lot of what it means. I mean, if you call somebody a racist today, you're almost inclined to say, okay, well, what did they actually say? You want to follow up. And I feel like that has also now extended to anti-Semite. Okay, what did they actually say? What do they think? That Israel shouldn't just be indiscriminately bombing? Does that make you an anti-Semite? Can we... Mm-hmm. We're kind of loosely using these terms nowadays. And because of that, nobody can agree on what any of these words actually mean. Right. What does defund the police mean? What does anti-Semite actually mean? We're just using them as catch-alls. And if you disagree with what I say and I don't want to hear you talk anymore, I'm going to throw one of those around and shut down the discussion.
Well, that's what's part of the problem is when you've got a word or a term that you want to use. One of the things in the 60s the radicals used to say is you can't talk about imperialism without saying imperialism. And I remember responding to people saying, yeah, sure the fuck you can. You can talk about anything without saying a particular word. You can describe it. You can talk about it. You can explain what you mean, and it'll have a lot more meaning when you do it. But to just feel like you've done the job of communication because you say a word that the other person may or may not understand or have a completely different view of what it is. I don't even know how to go there. That they have to use these terms. Maybe you don't use the term, even if it's appropriate. Maybe you don't.
So Eric, I'll just mention you did a show, and I was your guest, I think.
Yeah.
When we talked about fascism.
Right. Just
the term. It's thrown around so much today.
Yeah. Oh, especially today.
Yeah, it goes with what you just pointed out, that it's weaponized language. Of course, we all know that. Definitionally loosey goosey, but there's an academic definition that is so tightly constrained that it doesn't go much further.
No, but there was an actual fascist party that had a plank in Italy.
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. They actually called themselves fascist, right? And it had a set of tenets that was shared somewhat by the Nazi Party. You can't even really necessarily define the Nazi Party because they were much different from the Italian fascists in a lot of ways, but we have a historical context for them. It's not authoritarian or totalitarian. We have those words. We can use them. It just doesn't have the same emotional appeal to call somebody an authoritarian or a totalitarian.
Well, and it requires that historical context that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which, how many people have any level of understanding of that?
No,
who's taking the time to actually go back and read through and see, okay, what does a fascist state actually look like?
Yeah, and if it wasn't on a standardized test for high school, you're not going to learn it.
I'll just add that there is a professor from Yale, I think his last name's Stanley, and he wrote the book like The Fascist Playbook, something like that. And there's a little short video people could check out where he kind of goes through like chapter titles or something. Like, so he's going through 9 points in 9 minutes or something. So you just get his overview. That's an operational definition that is somewhat, it's obviously much more contemporary. It's somewhat applicable to describing critiques of rightward-leaning, far rightward-leaning, authoritarian adjacent behavior. Is it truly fascist? Well, not that strict definition, but that's the operating definition now. And even if you disagree with it, you can see in other people's argumentation and other people's expressing themselves that they believe that that's the case. And then so that just means that any one of those 9 elements, they could say, oh, I'm looking at right-leaning governments and I'm seeing this behavior. That's this. And then it doesn't have to be all 9. It could just be like, but then if you do start to see, oh, well, this is 3 of them, this is 4 of them. That book that he wrote made the rounds in DC years ago. So people,
if I'm going to recommend a book, I'd recommend Hannah Arendt's book on totalitarianism. She distinguished between the various forms of totalitarianism, distinguished Stalinism from fascism, from other types of nationalism and the rest. And it was that having that understanding, because words do have meaning. It's we want otherwise. If words don't have firm meanings, then we're not going to be able to communicate.
Well, that's the key, right? How do we have an actual discussion on a topic or on an issue if we can't agree on the root of these words?
Yeah. Well, then
we're just talking at each other.
I just say, then let's not use those words. Let's talk about the concepts. Particularly, what movement are you talking about? People will use, and the left will misuse fascism to describe something that the government is doing that's heavy-handed, right? And the problem is that fascism. One of the tenets that we agree with is it's a movement with a charismatic leader behind it. That's kind of pretty much essential to it. And so, as opposed to a more technocratic totalitarianism, Trotsky said, at least Hitler was interesting when he spoke, but Stalin is just boring, right? It's just he wasn't charismatic. He was a technocrat. And yeah, they're both just as brutal, but they were different concepts for different things and had to be combated on a different level.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing that I think is relevant today is that like I said, there's this disease of despair in across. I'll speak to America exclusively here, but it's out of scope for me to talk to reflect on other countries I know less about. But we have like massive depression, massive drug overdose death across the country. Formerly, people thought, oh, well, all these drugs people are taking and all this major problem must be the cities, must be concentrated poverty. But in reality, we're seeing, no, it's devastating to all communities. And particularly rural communities now are getting new attention that they never got before. So it's a universal problem. That despair, in part, comes from not being able to anticipate that you can affect your life, the well-being of your family. Can I put food on the table? Can I keep a roof over my head? Etc. And so people vilify powers bigger than themselves. So sometimes it's the government, sometimes it's corporate interests. But when, in a fascist model, when the government and the corporations are sort of mutually reinforcing, and then people that use violence or authoritarian, there's an acceptance, there's a democratic acceptance of that violence and that sort of antisocial behavior. Now it's creeping a little bit closer to the traditional fascism. So it makes sense now that you're starting to see people say, maybe that word isn't so far off. When the actual criticisms that they're making is, well, maybe we need a little bit more attention paid to the average person, the average worker, the average family, the middle class, things like healthcare, welfare, child care, labor law, like ... Go down all the list of things that are traditionally more democratic focused policy issues, but there are the same insecurities affecting everybody, not just D, but R, not just blue, but red, So it's purple. We are a purple country that feels like the most divided we've ever been. It looks like we're the most divided we've ever been, but this disease of despair reveals that we have so much in common. We just lack the leadership to bring us together.
And we're not the most divided we've ever been.
Yeah, we had a civil war.
We also had the 50s of McCarthyism, the 60s of the counterculture and riots all over the streets. It's nothing new. I mean, the whole point of Billy Joel, you got up there, his "We Didn't Start the Fire," is that history keeps moving and everybody thinks they're in the worst part of history, and we're not. I mean, it is really divided. We don't have the same media. We don't have Walter Cronkite to arbitrate things for us. But
I wonder, even with that, how accurate. I mean, I've used Walter as an example for what journalism used to be, but I wonder how true that is even for back then. I mean, you've had politicians cover. I think it was a Roosevelt who had polio and was in a wheelchair, and the press essentially lied to the American public about it and covered for him. They did, but there's one thing about Cronkite is he was attacked by right and left. He would say, say, oh, you're in the corporate hands coming from the left, or the right would say you're, liberal bias, blah, blah, blah. And he would just respond and say, fuck you, I'm Walter Cronkite, right? I mean, it was good comeback for back in the
day. Go ahead.
I was going to say, to be fair, there's 3 channels, 3 networks, corporate owned. I remember when GE owned NBC, for example, and it's still that way. So it's that's always been true,
right.
Of course. Hearst and Hearst Media and all that. The Spanish American War, so it's always been, sure.
Yeah.
But one of the issues is now when there's not 3 channels, when there's 3 channels, you just give the text to the newsreader.
Mm-hmm.
3 different flavors of it, but they're all that Overton window, that set of topics that are polite to talk about. The agenda is limited, and so there's still similar considerations, but it's way different in the sense that we've got all these different lanes of infotainment. Like Fox News, there was that famous court case where there was a question of, is it really fair and unbiased, and their defense was, we're not even news, we're like an infotainment channel, and the judge is like, yeah, Sure, you are an infotainment channel. So I mean, they know they're not news.
Yeah. To correct you though, that was, I think, with Sean Hannity, which I think they actually even distinguished between their news coverage,
correct,
as opposed to their panels,
right,
of commentary.
Yeah,
but still,
no, thanks for the clarification. That's true.
Don't you think that some of that despair that people are feeling today is just because we are so heavily propagandized? And you could look at it from a purely partisan standpoint. I mean, if you're listening just to the left, this upcoming election is about saving democracy, which if you want to make people think the sky is falling, that's a pretty damn good way to do it. Mm-hmm. Saying you're going to lose all your rights. You have to come out and vote blue to save democracy.
Right.
Or you could take global warming, that there's not going to be a planet
it's not even in the campaign, unfortunately.
Yeah, true. But
it's about abortion rights.
It's on the right as well. Yeah. It's on the right as well that the people that we have elected, our politicians, are propagandizing the people in a weird cyclical fashion.
That there's a deep state.
Yeah. And it's just, if you're constantly consuming that, it would be crazy for you not to feel some sense of despair with how heavy-handed they are.
So two things come to mind for me. One is that there is a tremendous amount of, I think on our show before, I've called it team building. And so there's a lot of programmed messaging for the purpose of what you had said, hyping up your base to turn out and vote, but also to kind of steer their thoughts in a particular direction for, harmonization of the, the people that you consider, that you can encourage, that you can incentivize to support you and turn out and vote. So there's that piece of it. But there was a documentary called The Social Dilemma.
Great film.
Right? So it talks about how in our we self-select who we talk to. And in that documentary, it's talking mostly about social media and its impact on polarization. But they had this one graphic where it mapped communication between people. And I don't recall, I think it was Facebook that they were using just because they could map the data. And they showed in the beginning of the map, people talked to all sorts of other people, family, friends. It didn't matter if they self-identified as red or blue. But as the algorithms kind of pushed different news feeds to them and they kind of were, if people's thoughts were evolving based on their information flow, you saw the polarization to the point where it's not 100%, but nearly one side almost all blue, one side almost all red, no interconnectivity between the two. So that's one thing worth mentioning. But there's also this thing called The Great Hack, another documentary. And it talks about Cambridge Analytica. And so this brings it back to what you talked about, polarization, political parties. The Great Hack talks about how Cambridge Analytica was able to get Facebook data from, I forget the exact number, but let's just say 70 million people or something, some huge number of people. And then they were able to map the all people on, I think, 5,000 different data points. So kind of like right now, how AI has gone out and scraped all the available knowable information about everybody on everything, and then uses it to do like this future think activity where it's kind of predicting what the best possible outcome is to any given question based on all the information available, like forever globally online. This is a little bit before that. This is from the 2016 election. So it's a Republican operation. Steve Bannon was one of the principals. So Cambridge Analytica, they were based out in London. They took all this information. Sorry, it's taken a long way to get there. So they have these 5,000 data points. They're able to make up to 1 million different custom persuasion strategies to target America. We have 150 million households, 3 people per household here in America. They have 1 million different information strategies. They are micro-targeting not just states, not just counties, not just election districts. They're micromanaging the messaging on a person by person, really an ISP by ISP basis. And that's 8 years ago. That's before we even thought about thinking about AI. So the techniques are so moving so fast, and they're so effective. Trump won in 2016. And so the marginal difference there, you could argue, was the ability to make sure that people had the information in front of them that the political party wanted them to.
Yeah. I'd like to make a pitch here. We talked about this. We have been trying to invite conservatives onto our show. We had one who showed up one time, but I'm afraid that some of the people he knew pressured him, saying, you don't want to platform them, right? You don't want to provide a platform. And it was a great show. We had a great show. And I want to just let people know, if you're out there and you'd like to join us to talk a show, even just every once in a while, you're conservative, libertarian, whatever, we're not going to humiliate you. We're not bringing you on there to humiliate you or even win an argument. If you feel intimidated because Dave and I do know a lot about politics, it's part of our hobby to study and the rest. We're not going to use that knowledge to show that you're wrong and we're right. We want a discussion. We want an actual discussion that will be constructive so that everybody watching learns something. They don't learn from somebody winning an argument.
Watching somebody get dunked on.
Yeah,
online.
It's not going to happen. And we don't do that. I've had conservatives on my All Things Reconsidered show, and they know now that I'm not going to do that. They were afraid to come on, okay, well, he's pretty good with words, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that. Some callers maybe if they're being obnoxious, but not a guest, never a guest. And most callers I won't do that with. If we're having an earnest discussion, I promise you, even if you're not as knowledgeable on the subject, we'll provide some of the information and knowing that, there's people that are much more knowledgeable than either of us who totally disagree. And we'll remind everybody on the air of that. This is not, about that. This is about getting a discussion going. We can't find anybody willing to do that. I think if they learn to do it, everything is so polarized. Everything is about winning the argument. We're not inviting you to win the argument. We're inviting you to have a discussion. So if anybody is listening to Nick's show, please take us up on that.
Well, it's challenging in part because we're in a pretty blue area, and to find first off, a conservative voice, but a knowledgeable conservative voice is pretty challenging around here.
So I'll just add, in the Venn diagram of life, 1 out of 3 people, of the people that are politically aligned, right? So we get about 40% people participated in civics. And so that's a lot of people that are on the sidelines. I always say apathy is rational. If you think that the whole system is so broken that it hurts your head to even engage, then that's self-preservation. I'm cool with that. I wish you would vote. I wish you would be engaged. But if this is all too painful, then straight up, apathy makes sense, even though I wish you didn't do it. But so we're talking about, in California, just big picture, out of all the voters, it's 2-1 Democratic to Republican. So in that makes it a little bit challenging, like you said. But then there's these other categories of people that are willing to be deliberative. People that aren't saying, well, I get a dose of dopamine from dunking on people, from trolling other people, from being the right, making it seem like I won. I think quite the contrary. What we actually benefit from is, I think I mentioned earlier, where we are, where we want to be, and how we get there. Any given topic will benefit from hearing both sides, regardless. And that's truthfully, that's it's a whole nother conversation, I guess. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about it. But the whole thing, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, or BDJ, belonging, dignity, and justice, those are or what's the other, critical race theory. Any of these things, they are highly controversial. I guarantee you that when you get down to the sort of founding principles of our country, the idea that we all have an equal voice and that we all get to actualize our aspirations, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and treat each other with dignity and respect, and it becomes mutually reinforcing. All that stuff we all agree on. But when we look at historical complications, we'll call it, that's where it gets a little bit harder. But now, fast forward to the present. I know lots of conservatives. I know lots of people who are self-identified Republicans, conservatives. Even some of my best friends from when I was younger. The Tea Party to them was hell yeah, this whole thing is broken. Patriots, we are obligated to fix it. Davey, you go out there, you speak your piece. We know we trust that you have something to say that will add to the conversation. In their mind, they're yeah, because you're like us. You're a conservative. You're a Tea Party, or you're, your values are family and country and God. We know that's how you were raised. I'm not overtly religious. I'm not overtly patriotic, and I don't have kids or a wife, right? So what makes them think that? It's that we can thoughtfully address issues of importance to our families together. And that's to me, that's, the pitch that Eric gave.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find people that can put aside, hey, I gotta be right. Put aside, hey, I know it all. Like, no, like what I think it's Buddha, right? If you think you got it, you don't got it, basically. Nobody has it. We all have, there's so much to know in the world. Maybe Da Vinci back in the 16th century knew most of what was knowable, but that's more of a joke. Like, it's impossible to know even a fraction of what is knowable. And it's only when we could put down our barriers that we can really, because even school, even education, even the library, the Dewey Decimal System, right? Everything, there's categorization, there's division. We separate everything out to all these subspecialists because you could spend a lifetime in the tiniest little sliver and scratch the surface of what's knowable. We all know that we don't know. I hope that there's just way more out there. So it's not, you're not like, I'm not sorry to keep talking, but
no, that's
like the whole Lion and the Lamb thing, right? If you look at Thomas Frank's book, What's Wrong with Kansas? And he's saying people vote against their self-interest. And that's why it tends to be more conservative success in electoral politics than Democrat or liberal success.
Either their interest or their identity.
That's the thing, the identity, right? So their identity becomes, well, I'm not a lamb, I'm a lion. Mm-hmm. And it's more important for me, any issue I'm looking at, like say Black Lives Matter versus, defund the police versus Blue Lives Matter and whatever the other, antecedent is to that, right? So you're going to pick one, but no, let's pick safe communities, safe families, dignity for all of our fellow citizens in our community, well-paid, well-respected police. And you know what? When the police mess up, hell yeah, they get charged. They go to special police jail, like judges and politicians, right? Like they have a higher standard. Like when the patriarch of a family is the one who abuses the family, we think he needs the most punishment, right? And so that kind of a consensus building around shared values, the values exist, like the elements of character that reinforce integrity. That's the foundation of trust. We get to that conversation, then we kind of pare back the polarization, and not to be preachy, but like those are the conservatives I would like to talk to. Take your pick. Immigration is a great policy. We had somebody call into one of I think it was Eric's show, and they said, "But aren't you like afraid in the community of all the criminals streaming across the border?" And Eric's like, "I'm not afraid. We've got lots of immigrants here, and no, I'm not afraid by them." And like, I'm not putting words in your mouth or anything, but like the idea is that, like, let's talk about immigration policy. Let's talk about solutions. Let's not talk about fear.
I want to also add that, one of the things I think is real important is for people to be able to change their minds, and not change their mind when they experience something traumatic like being mugged or 9/11 or if you're a left-winger getting beat up at a demonstration or something like that. I mean, actually with your frontal lobes, changing your mind, having be presented with evidence that maybe your position is wrong, and maybe not even just totally change your mind, but looking at the issue differently. When I spoke to Christian leftists in the 1980s, as I was getting to know them, who opposed abortion personally, they were pro-choice, but they opposed abortion personally, they convinced me to look at the issue a little bit differently. I still am all about the autonomy of the woman's body, but I do understand why people feel strongly about the preservation of the process of life. So I believe, I really was upset when at the women's marches they were barring feminists for life from the march, saying you can't be real feminists. They are real feminists. They just look at the issue different from you. Well, one of the questions I was asked one time, because I'm into reading about science and learning, is who to you is the greatest scientist in history? And I had my answer right away. But I told him if you asked me who my second favorite or the second best was, I'd have a real hard time answering. Einstein, Newton, Galileo, Copernicus, all kinds of people that have made all kinds of great passages. But to me, in terms of the historical importance, I consider Johannes Kepler to be the best scientist. The reason being is for his whole life, he was calculating the motions of the planets, and he believed that there was some sort of unifying thing that God had made that related the 5 planets that they knew about to the 5 perfect solids geometrically. He believed that there was a relationship between them, and he sought all the data. And if you know the story, he got a lot of data about planetary motions from the Danish king Tycho. Tycho Brahe, yeah. And he ended up changing his whole mind. He realized, this is silly. There's no relationship between the 5 solids and the orbits of the 5 planets. And I think in his 40s, maybe he had been spending years trying to prove a theory. He said, no, that theory is wrong. Like his life work at that time, accepting that it was wrong. I see that as at least one of the most heroic scientific moments, as an example to everybody, to be able to admit that you are wrong about something when presented with facts, rather than process out those facts, focus on the ones that support you. And he had actually some pretty interesting data that just made things really wild about why there should be a relationship between them. But it all came apart when he got the more detailed data, and rather than trying to hammer everything into a new theory, he said, "No, I was wrong. Time for another project." That to me is the story. It was told very well by Carl Sagan in Cosmos. He had a whole chapter on Kepler,
and you could boil it down to data, not dogma.
Yeah, right. I mean, but how do you do that? Because our emotions are wrapped up in what we believe. We've created a self-identity about that.
So you reminded me, not to just keep talking, but
no, that's what we're here to do.
Cool. So I think it's important in this context here, which by the way, I really appreciate this. I had no idea what to expect, and I think the free flow and style, I love it. There was a cognitive psychologist that was on another KMUD show called Thinking Clearly with
Julia Minton and
Bob Freilich.
Yeah. Great show.
And so it was about beliefs. So they spent an hour talking about beliefs. There's a lot. I'm not doing it justice, but I pulled over and listened to it. I was on my way home from Redway, and I pulled over because I was like, this is good, and I gotta focus. And one of the things that he said was, our beliefs are almost impossible to change after our formative years. So depending on the person, 18, it could be a little bit older, but not much. Our beliefs are basically fixed. Our conscious beliefs, because it's wrapped up, like you said, in identity and all these other things. We believe what we believe because of the way our brain, partly because of heuristics, the way we get new information, it gets mapped the way it gets mapped, and that system is going to take any new information and be like, oh, it fits there. It fits there. So even if we hear evidence of something that's contrary to what we believe, we kind of change it and we make it fit our model, how our brain sets up processing. But I think one of them, and I don't recall who, said this is not very optimistic. What's the point then? How can we break that mold, break that pattern? And what he said was, well, luckily for us, our subconscious works at a level deeper than our conscious. So what our subconscious responds to is cause and effect. And so when under the surface, your brain is getting information about actual causes and actual effect, like the kid learning not to touch the hot stove. Even though they want to grab that pan because they're 5 years old, they've been burned once or twice. That third time they go, oh, wait. That's their subconscious stepping in milliseconds before their agency is go grab that thing. But their brain's like, whoa, burn. And they go, oh, wait, right? So that's an example that makes sense. But it's really with repetition, as an adult, if you're exposed to cause and effect, you're exposed to new ideas that maybe they don't fit the natural way you're going to deal with the world, your brain actually changes underneath and makes you more receptive to new ideas. And then at some point, it might become a conscious thought. And at some point, your belief might change. But there was a degree of it's so rare that people expose themselves to new ideas with enough frequency and duration that they're actually going to learn something new, that they don't just kind of not quite distort, but they might get lost in translation between when they hear it and when it sinks into their head. So there's a chance.
He's looking at it neurologically. I also think that basically one way you can be critical thinker is to anything you believe, attack it. To attack it as if you are, and this is me coming as a lawyer, as if you are prosecuting the case against it. Go find all the evidence you can to attack it. Consider the evidence to defend it, but attack it as hard as possible. And if it still survives, maybe it's worth believing. But at very least, you're going to look at the issue differently. If there's something worth believing, it should survive the scrutiny. Just take, it was even exemplified in the movie Contact. I don't know if you remember, but
I have actually never seen that movie.
Oh, you need to watch it. It's one of my favorite science fictions ever. But she's obviously listening for aliens talking, right, and to them, and they receive a signal. And they get in there and they're like saying, boy, this seems to be out of the area. It doesn't seem to be local, seems to be too strong, doesn't sound like anything we've ever had. And she gets in there and says, make me a liar. Tell me, why this is not an alien message. And they go through all the possibilities, and they just say one by one, they shut it down and say, we got to consider that this might be an alien thing. And then they get into more detail. But I loved that moment of the movie. Make me a liar. Let's go look into it. Well, okay, this was in Vega. It's coming from Vega. We know that that's filled with asteroids, Maxima, and it's really hard for anything to do. And one of the guys, jokingly says, well, maybe they use their laser blasters and photon torpedoes. And they say, no, we need to focus on doing this. It is one of the things, an exercise that is hard to do, but I've done it, and I have actually changed my mind on some issues over the years. I have a different attitude towards gun control than I did when I really considered the fact that if you weaken one part of the Bill of Rights, you can weaken the whole thing. Looking at the evidence, I don't give a damn about guns, but I do care about the Bill of Rights. I get into trouble because I have a different approach. I do not believe that Zionism is inherently racist, because I met people, the people from Israel who were more radical, more left-wing than I was, who took a totally different position. So it did actually change, and it didn't happen right away. It was just kind of gradually as I'm reading more stuff with that information and context. But take it upon yourself. Don't be afraid that you're going to change your mind. Don't be afraid of it. I
just don't know how many people are doing that today.
No, nobody. Yeah,
that's the challenge. No. It all sounds great in theory, and it's a phenomenal practice.
You got to do it. Yeah.
But people have to work out and maintain, physical activity to be healthy. And how many people actually do that?
Right.
People need to not drink themselves to death. And there's just no, you're talking about cause and effect with these ideas. It's more challenging. You can hold a bad idea and not ever get burned and go your entire life holding on to this bad idea, this faulty view of the world that you have. And it might be constantly challenged if you go outside of your circle that agrees with you. But are you actually going to change it? Why?
Yeah. No, it's hard. I think just exposing yourself. Commit to.
But even that, what does exposure look like?
Well, today? At least start by reading the stuff or watching the stuff. Choose a magazine or some type of periodical of an opposite, one that you can respect, that you don't think is stupid, but one that you can respect. Commentary is a conservative magazine that I have great respect for, actually done by a person who was born a socialist, right? And moved over. That's how I figure, well, if it could affect him that way, maybe that thinking process could. It didn't, but I do look at things differently. Human events, right? I pick a few, but those are kind of academic. There's other ones that maybe are a little bit more interesting, but don't be afraid to expose yourself. I have a cousin who has gone all Trump, and keeps sending me these Matt Walsh videos, which the guy is just annoying on top of being wrong. Sorry about most of the stuff. And he keeps sending me and said, I tell you what, Vince, I will watch 10 of your videos if you'll watch one of mine. He says, I'm not going to watch communist propaganda, blah, blah, blah.
That's my point right there. Yeah. Couldn't even do a 10-to-1 ratio.
Couldn't even do a 10-to-1 ratio. And but I'm wondering if there are other people out there challenging. Right now, I've got a discussion going. We're a little bit behind, but I asked him to come up with, we're reading Gilbert's History of Israel at the same time Khalidi's 100 Years of War on Palestine, reading them concurrently. And it's interesting, the differences. It's also very interesting, the similarities, where they actually agree on the same facts, but they have a different take on them. And I'm learning from both of them. And I'm learning that both are not perfect. But
as is often the case.
As often the case, yeah, because, And so, just do it for entertainment. Just
I don't think a lot of people find that entertaining.
It's
once you get attached to your ideas, which I think it's safe to say all of us can slip into, it becomes a part of your identity.
Yeah, but
kill that part off is almost like cutting off an extremity.
Even when I hated Buckley's politics, I loved his wit, his sense of humor. It always cracked me up. It was aimed at me a lot of times, but it's like, okay, I can take it, right? It's just find something you like about it and focus on that. And as it turned out, Buckley wasn't all that right-wing by the time he died. He started, he opposed the Iraq War, started saying, I do think people in college, it's perfectly natural for them to be socialists and maybe even retain it into their old age. I understand the impulse. He wouldn't have said that back when he was writing, up from socialism, before he founded National Review. But, so he changed because he exposed himself to things.
So I want to kind of, I guess, cue off of what you'd said. First, as sort of an aside, I think that there's not a lot of people that are like reading policy analysis for pleasure or even theory, right?
Yeah, no,
so like
we're geeks.
I studied social political theory and I thought it was interesting. I studied political science. I thought it was interesting, philosophy, interesting, to get a better sense of how to view the world through a variety of perspectives. But for some folks, they're like, that's not my game. It's not my jam. So I get it. But that's parenthetical. I just wanted to sort of say, like, from that perspective, if you look at, you're talking about Buckley, there's a famous debate, James Baldwin, right?
Yes.
Who wrote
great debate.
It's on YouTube. He wrote The Fire Next Time. And he talks about how if peaceful change is impossible, violent change is inevitable. Like, that's the gist of it, is like, hey, all my people, like, we are looked at, Black Americans, we are looked at differently. And it doesn't matter how smart I am. And it doesn't matter how much I add to anything in my presence, any activity, any goal, no matter what I'm adding. First, I'm a Black person. And it was just trying to draw attention to, like, hey, white people, just so you know, you look at us differently. Like, that's the thing. And then he's like, okay, well, we need incremental change at least so that we see a partner in change. And then that's where this came from. The fire next time. It's like, hey, look, like, if it doesn't happen, this is going to happen again. Race riots of the 60s are going to keep happening unless something different happens. But we got the Civil Rights Act. We got changes. We have evolution. I was born in, and this is controversial to say out loud, especially publicly, but I was born in 1971, Civil Rights Act 65. There's nobody in my family, born in that interim period, which means everybody in my family older than me. This is sort of, for purposes of illustration, there's been about 100,000 generations when the tree of evolution split off from, like, chimpanzees. We're related, but it's like 100,000-ish generations ago, according to, science, right? So that's what people say. That's a long time for us to say, that's the other. That's the other. Our brains evolved. That's the other. They are different. That's the other. But Civil rights, Freudian slip maybe. Civil war, then civil rights act. 100, there you go. 100 years later, actually, maybe it was worth saying. It took 100 years to go from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Act. We had the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, but we get there eventually. That's 65, right? So we're talking 60 years ago. That's not a lot of time. So we've built into the system more progress. We've built into our interpersonal relationships more mutual respect. But it's a work in progress. And so I'm just saying, like, getting back to the Buckley debate, it was just, and like Eric said, you could watch it for free on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's so illuminating to see somebody like Buckley, who's so smart and so knowledgeable. And not just that, his rhetorical skills are like, I own you. I am so much smarter than you.
Right.
Like, whatever you're trying to say, no chance. I'll squash your brain. And James Baldwin's just like, there's a thing in the air, which I just described. And he's saying, like, this is, if you are white and you haven't learned this lesson yet, I'm inviting you to evolve. And the reason I say this is because you don't have to read Hannah Arendt, who you
Hannah Arendt.
Yeah, Arendt. Yeah,
it's hard reading.
She wrote The Banality of Evil, right?
Right.
And so she's talking about in Nazi Germany that people voted for Hitler. People loved to have the development and the psyche of cultural strength and progress, and then but it went farther a little bit, to like, or a lot, to the most extreme maybe society that we point to. But her point is, yeah, but all those people that lived around the concentration camps, they maybe they didn't exactly know, but to them it was like, what's the difference? Like it's common that sometimes indifference is common. They're not actually. She's not like making the case that if you were a religious person, you would think they go to hell for all their evil. Not that kind of evil, but the evil of neglect and indifference. And the reason I mention this is because it can be much more subtle, and the stakes could be much lower. People just point to Nazi Germany as an extremist case, like the Godwin's law. One of my former coworkers, Mike Godwin, he have you heard of Godwin's law?
I have not.
Yeah. So basically it's that on the internet, online, any given debate between two people, any argument will devolve at some point to the point where the one person calls the other person a Nazi.
Oh, yeah. I believe that.
And the longer it goes, the higher the probability. The probability of it. Yeah. And Godwin's law, by the way, doesn't say it's always not justified. It just says it's a fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tongue in cheek, but the point is this. The point is, like, we use that as the extreme.
Yeah.
And that's in us all. Is that, like, we're going to get to the point where we're going to disagree and we're going to fight. And we're going to disagree and we're going to fight. We're going to disagree and fight. And then we're going to otherize that other person to the point where we're saying, you are the lowest of the low. Like, if society was the way you want it to be, it would be the example textbook number one worst way to organize a society would be that. Yeah. And it's like, again, it's somewhat tongue in cheek, I think, when he created it, but it's stuck. Like the internet, it's a thing.
It's a thing. I do want to say one thing about the Baldwin Buckley debate. It was incredible to watch, but the way they did the debates back then is there's a question. Resolve, blah, blah, blah. And I don't even remember what the question was. All I remember, because it's been a long time since I watched it, is neither Baldwin nor Buckley addressed the damn question.
Yeah.
The students before them did, but they were probably being graded on it, right? But I noticed that as a lawyer. I'm like, okay, this is all very interesting, but what about the question? It was just, it was kind of interesting, but that's just, I noticed things too, like during Obama-McCain debate. I think it was the second one. They were talking about foreign policy. Okay, McCain was an expert on Russia, and Obama did not want to get into a debate with him about Russia because he would obviously be outclassed. So the question comes up about Russia, and I thought Obama was just ducking it. I thought that McCain was going to zing him by saying, well, since you don't want to talk about Russia because you're afraid to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. But he hit on something about oil policy and something that McCain was kind of weak on or being attacked on. And so he triggered McCain, and McCain was so pissed, he's just responded about the oil question and completely missed it. I'm like, what the hell? He had a chance to make a point there, but Obama apparently knew what he was doing because it worked. And I'm like, okay, let's go back. And I just said, they didn't address the question. And the people I was, watching it with said, I didn't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, that's me as a lawyer focused on the question and the response. And Buckley nor Baldwin did it either. It's just like, and that annoys me. I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just otherwise, it was a great debate. Of course, a couple of years after that, he had the famous debates with Gore Vidal, and both of them are arrogant, sons of bitches, and they ended up almost getting into a fight at one point because they were like saying, Buckley was saying, well, I think the Chicago police are justified in what they did, and it could be that some of those people in there are basically Nazis, and Gore Vidal says, as far as I'm concerned, the only crypto Nazi in the room is yourself, and then Buckley says, yeah, I'll sock you in the nose if you say that again, and then later there was actually a lawsuit about it. Buckley sued for defamation, and there was sort of apology, not apologize. I said, yeah, I don't know what got into me. I didn't mean to say crypto Nazi. I only meant to say crypto fascist. It was just
I think he actually said, I'll punch you in the goddamn mouth.
Yeah, I don't remember. But
he's an prim and proper, and you would never expect him to come out. And he
called Vidal a queer, which, Gore Vidal was one of the few people brave enough to be out at the time, but Vidal didn't care. It was just, it was intense, but that was also intense. That was during the Chicago, demonstrations when Mayor Daley didn't provide any permits for any demonstration anywhere, which was absolutely stupid, impractical, just as a matter of principle. And you had thousands of people show up, kids mostly, and
just for context, this is after the assassination of Fred Hampton.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have city police, state troopers,
wait.
Federal agents.
Wait, did Fred Hampton? I thought Fred Hampton died later during the trial. I might be wrong.
When was the trial?
The trial would have been afterwards, late 68 or early 69. But I think you're right. I think it was Hampton.
But right around this time, right? So within months, a dozen months either direction. But this is the idea, again, for context, is that people say, hey, the police sometimes behave in ways that we might not want them to if we had a perfectly balanced and thoughtful society, right? But that's a little different. We're talking about, again, local police. State police, federal agents of multiple agencies and levels infiltrating an organization.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they did it, you could check this out yourself, but there's tons of documentaries and other things about it. If you don't want to read, you could watch it, right? My recollection is that they didn't just kill him, right? They had a string that, the number doesn't matter. It was an overt act of state violence to send a message.
Something like 20 bullets or something went in. Yeah. And they were saying, he was shooting him. There was no way. He was in his bed.
And then I think they drugged him and he was passed out too.
It's the first case the FBI lost in civil rights. They ended up paying $1 million, which was significant at the time.
And honestly, not to open up a whole new can of worms, but people that I know on the right will say, what to these anti-imperialist leftists, they must be communists. They must want to be Venezuela or something. And it's well, actually, if people are pointing out our policies that are documented in books and movies and real documents released by our government about its decision-making process, about, people say you vote with your dollars, you spend money in a way that you think you ought to spend it. The government does that. They vote with their dollars. They fund certain projects and programs in Chile, all throughout South America. So there are people once you learn that wait, we do that, our country in our name with our money.
And that was a democratically elected government. And when asked about, do you have the right to try to overthrow a democratic government? Kissinger's famous response was, I don't see why we have to let a country go communist due to the irresponsibility of its own people.
There you go. That's exactly my point. Yeah. So that's the thing, right? When we're saying we ought to, hold our leaders to account, to uphold our values, and maybe make decisions in alignment with what we think ought to be. That's a position. That's a viable. maybe it is a minority of the country that is informed enough, has those values, wants to express them. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't disqualify them from participating in the conversation. Yeah. And us all learning from that. 2024, we could learn from the last 50 years of people looking at our country's policies in the past. It's not saying, you know what, I'd like us to be like Venezuela. It's not even anything close to that. It's saying, let's hold our leaders to account. But I want to say in context, because the other way around too, to my friends on the left commenting about people on the right, this is an oversimplification, but Western civilization, right? Like Greco-Roman, Anglo-American continuum of history of the West. The United States after World War II took responsibility for leadership in the maintenance of the world order. And maybe people disagree with that's what role we ought to have, but that's the role that we have. And our allies, NATO, that's the role that our European allies share with us. And so we don't have to get super in the details, but the idea is that for context, if people want to assess any given U.S. intervention anywhere in the world, we have 700 whatever bases all over, and every dot on the planet, there's a base. It's for a reason. It's for shipping, and it's for surveillance, and it's for to put down things that come up that our country considers a priority. That's what we have. That's the reality of the responsibility. So no matter who you are, you get elected president, whether you're Donald Trump or whether you're Joe Biden. Both of them were or are president. When they got to the White House and there was a problem going on, people presented to them, this is the problem, these are solutions, which one do you want? It's not like the president is like, I know everything about everything and I'm going to be the person that decides the fate of mankind or even the fate of America. It's a burden that ages these people, right? Like you've seen people when they come out of office.
Well, everybody but Trump.
Yeah.
Trump came out looking fine.
Yeah.
Everybody else, you look at Obama pre and post.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Stark contrast.
You have to care.
Trump is looking bad now, but I think the age is just catching up to him.
But even now, he still looks great in comparison to arguably every other president.
Right. No, Bush, you looked at it, they turn gray. It just it
ages
takes
you.
it out of you.
I think he might be particularly unburdened. So one observation, not to be judgy, really. I mean, this is an honest to God observation about him. I think that he wings it, right? Like when he's in a room, he's like, I feel this way. This is what I'm going to say. And then he wakes up the next day and he's like, I feel this way. This is what I'm going to say. I think people around him, smart people around him, help him succeed to the extent that he succeeds. But I just, as a observation.
He doesn't if he fails, he doesn't fail. He just doesn't acknowledge it, right? If things are happening, it's not his fault. So
it is overly simplistic, but
absolutely.
But there's a way to say he didn't look like he carried the burden of the free world because maybe he didn't carry it the way other people do.
Yeah. I don't. At any rate, it is interesting. I mean, we talk about Trump. We could talk a little bit about it tonight. Why he's actually losing at the moment.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but I want to touch on this idea of political accountability because I don't know if first off, I don't know if we ever had that to some extent, and moreover, I don't know that we ever get that in terms of a practical. Hey, you did this. We're going to hold you accountable.
We had it with Carter.
Wait, hold on. Before we dive into a specific example, just to be clear, I was making the case that I don't think politicians at that level, they don't actually, this again, oversimplification, but it's one thing to be in the Senate and say, I'm just going to throw what I throw. These people in my state got my back. I got a big staff and I get information that I need. And either I'm going to live or die by the state that I represent. I think at the national level, at the White House level, we're talking about something pretty different because it's global. Because accountability is when you say, I'm going to make a decision about, say, Ukraine or Afghanistan or Israel, right? Or take your pick. I'm going to make a decision about those things. I think, unfortunately, for most people to digest, is that there are responsibilities way beyond the scope of public accountability. We don't. There's so much classified stuff that we have to choose our poison, so to speak, pick our battles as as a citizenry about what our priorities are and what we think we could actually affect. So I'll just give you one example before. I'm sorry, I said no examples, but I think this one's worth it. Fracking. Kamala Harris said, in theory, the idea of all that pollution in the name of this new technique of getting extra oil is probably cost benefit a negative. I'm going to stick with the environmentalists who support me. Like, I think that's used to be her general position. So not to oversimplify. But when you're president and there's a war against Russia, and Russia's got this immense percentage of the world's resources, the United States now produces more and exports more than any other country. We're like the Saudi Arabia of the world now. It's in part because of these technologies. It's not negotiable. Like, they're not actually going to stop fracking. I wish it was true, but I mean, not that I literally wish it was true. I wish that this was something that the democratic process was able to hold people to account for. Or like the drone wars. How many people did Obama, how many decisions were made by that president? He might not necessarily want to have drone assassinations, but it's not something that's negotiable. It's not something he could do. So in terms of accountability, it's like a scorecard. It's like, well, of the things that they could affect, do they best represent how I would choose my leader to go? So I'm sorry I interrupted you both, but I think accountability is really, defining accountability is hard in the context of the president versus any other elected.
The president is only going to be there 8 years.
Yes, but hold on. That's almost a diffusion of responsibility as a cop-out.
Yeah.
That the system is so large and there's so many moving pieces that we can't hold anybody to account, because where does the buck stop in some sense? And I think on fracking,
inflation. Let's talk about inflation.
Well, on fracking, I believe Kamala Harris has reversed her stance.
That's why I used that example.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, she has.
You can pick concrete examples. I mean,
inflation.
Well, more concrete than that, you could look at what we did to Iraq, and there's no accountability there. You could look at the drone strikes on American citizens abroad under Obama.
That was the drone strikes I was talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. That is a pretty concrete example of, we know who had the ultimate say of let's pull the trigger.
Could have stopped, yeah.
And there's no accountability there. I mean, those are finite examples of, we know we can point to an individual who said, yes, fire the missile.
Carter didn't like what the CIA had been doing.
Get back to that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, Carter is the only president who has ever tried to clean out the CIA. They call it the October Massacre, if you want to look it up, or the Halloween Massacre. I can't remember which it was, but he fired a bunch of them. He paid for that because they were not cooperating with this policy at all, and it was and so when he did that, the hostages and everything were blamed on him for that. And the minute he was out of office, they were all back in there, including Dick Cheney, by the way. It was that was just. And the lesson there was, don't mess with, I guess, what Trump would call the deep state here. So, people that will come into the president and say, we've been here long before you. We're going to be here long after you. You're going to be here at most 8 years. Don't fuck with us. I mean, I just, I could see that conversations like that happen. I mean, in not that blatant, but kind of like, we know what we've been doing, what we're doing. We've been doing this, and there's almost kind of an ecology to our policy. If you start messing with us, things will go wrong, and it's just, and it's real hard. But, Carter tried, and nobody's tried since.
So you...
Not even Trump.
I do want to pivot back to, you're saying drain the swamp, which obviously...
It's not, swamp pertained to lobbyists. But we're talking about, people that have ongoing policy that doesn't get changed, like the drones.
So before we pivot, when Hillary ran against Trump, there was a law firm. It doesn't matter what the name of the law firm is. You can look it up. That was part of her, if she won, which they thought they were going to win, that was her transition team. When Trump won, that same firm was his transition team.
Yeah.
So it's not that you have to define something as, a deep state. Like, you don't have to say it's a deep state. You're just saying these are people that are well positioned to manage national interest regardless of the political process. So like, there's a guy, Schumpeter, 1950s political theorist guy. And so he just talked about how it's actually kind of good that only such a small percentage of the people participate in the process. He said it's because most people they're not knowledgeable or qualified. So if people are apathetic and they sit on the sideline, then that's one less uninformed voice that we really need to speak to. So I'm saying this again, sort of tongue in cheek, but like that whole concept of accountability is couched in, you've got problems. Like I said, you've got problems and you've got solutions. And there's what is it? I think Federalist 51, if I remember correctly. I don't remember which Federalist paper it is, but it's factions will balance out. And it's that, our system is set up where it's a democracy and everybody gets a voice, but by that, landowning white dudes and everything else. But that, there were some limitations to who everybody was. But the idea is that if some people are Federalists and some people are anti-Federalists, then some people will want, Hamilton, they'll want that First National Bank of the United States. And other people will say, no, we actually want, the colonial banks to be state banks. And we want each community's, each subpopulation, Virginia, New York, et cetera, to kind of have their own economic powerhouses that are local. So these are differences of opinion, but they actually have massive consequences as we go from a country of 3 million people to a country of 330 million people. So the idea is, I just want to circle back to that accountability thing. I'm definitely not intending to be defeatist because you always have to speak truth to power. You always have to set the standards as high as you can and point the politicians, point the political process, all these people in the right direction. I'm just saying, like, again, not to circle back to this, but it's one of the most complex issues in the world. After World War I and the Ottoman Empire is broken up, there's a bunch of European powers that are at the table trying to figure out how to draw the lines. Those lines created problems everywhere they were drawn because they weren't based on whatever self-determination principles we have in mind. They're based on very highly, we'll call them political / economic, factional interests. The factions got together. The factions decided. They weren't Ottoman factions, right? These were European factions. And then so after World War II, when those lines are still needing to be defended, now the present, those lines need to be defended. Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and we say, oh, he crossed that line. That's a line we needed to defend. The Kuwaiti royal family is very closely associated with Britain, United Kingdom. United Kingdom's got an interest. Now all the European powers in the United States, we have to defend that line, right? So it's not just because who was the leader of Iraq or who was the leader of Kuwait or what are they even arguing about cross-drilling of oil reserves underneath the border or tapping into the same reserves or whatever the pretext was for that conflict or whatever the actual outcome was from that conflict. It's that there are forces that, as an American voter, as a community member, like so much of what we apply our attention and our interest to are the food on the table, like I said, shelter and making sure we have education and that there's not, all the things that are local. We're not actually going to ever really say, you know what, I want my government to get engaged in a conflict over this World War I resolution that was, breached. And so that's the point I'm saying about how some things are just, when the president sits down with all the solutions at the table, they never said, well, what is the common folks in the counties across the country, where are their interests lie? Yes, they have to keep that in mind. But if they know that less than half the people are voting, and they know that in any given election year, they could throw a bunch of promises at us, a bunch of culture war stuff. They get us amped up about how Biden's too old and he's we won't have a country if we go with that, or Trump is too authoritarian and we won't have a country if we go with that. Like that, they know that they can divide and conquer. I say they. It's not a conspiracy. It's overtly open.
Culture.
It's a culture. Exactly. It's our culture, right? It's that accountability has limitations.
See, I hear that and I go defeatist because I don't know how accountability scales to a government or to its representatives at scale. I mean, where's the accountability for Vietnam? Or again, where's the accountability for Iraq? Where's the accountability for any of...
Shame. It's been shame for both, I think.
But who is shamed for Vietnam?
Does it translate into election...
And even shame only goes... I mean... Yeah. There are people that still don't understand what really happened with Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin. So, and shame doesn't really mean anything. And especially if all of those people maintain power, what is shame from the commoner, from the layperson? What does that look like?
Does that have any tangible effect? Does it mean that you don't win the next election or that your predecessor does? That rarely translates into anything like that. I mean, you can have things go bad, and inflation killed Carter probably more than any
well, the hostages, the way that they played that out was damning as well.
Right.
Yeah. But, I mean, there are 1,000 concrete examples like that where decisions made by our government, or I think it's Vivek Ramaswamy that likes to refer to the deep state as more of an idea in terms of a managerial class. I think he's used that term.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little better branding for people to stomach.
So the problem I have with the conspiracy theories is I don't think, like especially 9/11, all right? I don't think
this escalated quickly.
I'm interested.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I mean,
wait, all roads lead back to 9/11.
Well, it's
not just Nazis.
It's 9/11. I mean, here you have supposedly this deep state government inside job, blah blah blah, pulling this off, pulling the wool over all the world's media. And just coming off it with nobody. I mean, tens of thousands of people had to be involved with that. Not one whistleblower, not one person getting drunk in a bar and letting something slip. And just the precision that would be required, I just don't think that people in government, whether they're deep state or elected, are that competent.
But 9/11, what angle are you looking at 9/11 through?
Especially compared to Iraq and Vietnam.
Right. Whether it was an inside job. The government works with a sledgehammer. They're not surgeons.
But we know concretely about the Saudi involvement and how they covered that up.
Absolutely. Yeah, we know that the Saudis were involved. We know that there probably was a massive failure on the part. And see, that's the thing. Everybody, for a long time, I believed that the CIA killed John Kennedy when I was young. The more I started to look at it, it's like, okay, that there's a lot of holes in that, but there definitely was a cover-up. What did they cover up? Probably the fact that they were inept. That they were covering up, that they lost the trail. If there was a second shooter, and that doesn't mean it was a conspiracy, it could mean that there were just second shooters. They lost the trail. Would America accept that they can't find the second guy when they absolutely have no clue? When you look at the wording of Warren when he finished the report, accepting the magic bullet theory and all of that, his thing was, we need to move on. We need to do this. I think the 9/11 report was a schlock job because there was a lot of incompetence there. That's why I don't believe the conspiracy theories, because I don't believe they could pull something like that off. Every time they try, they could pull that off, but they can't. They couldn't get away with putting some weapons into Iraq and convincing everybody that they were Hussein's. They tried a couple of times, it looks like, but it didn't work. It was just possibly. But I just don't. My problem with the conspiracy theory is I don't think there are people that are that good at what they do that they can do these things. Now, simple things. The Gulf of Tonkin thing was a total hype, and you can lie about something and come up with some evidence or something like that, or the sinking of the Maine for the Spanish Civil War, or whatever. But sometimes it's what it appears to be, and I think a lot of times it's incompetence. There's a lot of...
Yeah, but I mean, 9/11, there are just so many other factors. There was I don't know if it was a letter written to Congress that was detailing how we needed to be involved in the toppling of Iran, but you definitely had Bibi Netanyahu back then testifying as a supposed expert in the Middle East, saying that we needed to go through and topple these governments and that democracy would...
it definitely presented
the region.
Definitely presented opportunity, and they were definitely ready with the what do you call it, Homeland Security Act that they'd been writing for years.
Patriot Act.
Patriot Act. Thank you. Yeah,
I don't know that them being inept and trying to cover it up suffices as an explanation, because they look inept either way. A president was shot, and killed. So the idea that
but if there was a second gunner out there, and I don't entirely say that's not possible, because I do have all the questions that are raised about whether or not the rifle Oswald was using even shoots that straight. I mean, there's a lot of questions about it.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but if there was a second gunner, would America put up with the fact, and the trail went cold because they were so focused on Oswald. They stand up and say, yeah, we don't know who the second gunner is, who might be the one who actually killed him, and we don't know what to do. And sorry, but too bad. That's something that they might want to cover up.
But you don't think there's so many supplemental pieces of evidence that make it seem more plausible than not that there was not just a cover-up, which I think is safe to say that there was a cover-up to some extent, but that it wasn't ineptitude. I mean, the fact that you had people saying there were shooters on the grassy knoll, the fact that so many people died that were present that day with theories of
that
other
died
shooters.
Of cancer and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I hear
in a relatively short time frame after this all happened.
But with all of the media focusing on him, if it was a grand conspiracy to actually kill Kennedy, I don't think that they would have been able to keep that boxed up. It's they would have needed.
Right. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, why still not release the documents? Why still push for secrecy?
Because a lot of people would be revealed if they lost the trail of the second gunner. That would be, why have you taken so long to tell us that? That's it's.
I don't know. That one feels, and maybe it's just my tinfoil hat, but. That one
I got you.
Deeper.
I actually watched that goofy Stone movie, being convinced that he was completely right. Unfortunately, he took the attitude that if anything was in print, it was good, fair game to use, and it contradicts itself, on a lot of stuff. I watched it. I remember reading Coup d'etat in America and all of that. But it just, after a while, I started to think, wait a minute, there's just no way they could have pulled this off.
So let me just add this, because in the name of moving us along a teeny bit, because where we came back to, I'll just say it this way. There's Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, and his brother, members of the Royal Society. They wrote lots of interesting books that teach us a lot about human nature and societal priorities and structure. One of the books written is called Open. Well, first of all, one of the books is called New World Order, but another one of the books is called Open Conspiracy, and the gist of Open Conspiracy is, and hopefully I'm giving it. There's other things in there that are worth reading. I don't mean to just limit it to this, but it's basically like, look, we own everything, and we've always run everything, so we decide history, and we decide the present, and therefore it's sort of our inheritance, and it's plausible that as long as we just do what we feel like doing when we feel like doing it, and we're careful, it's this open conspiracy is us deciding things, period. And it's, to me, that's, whether we ever get the answers on JFK, whether we ever get the answers.
Part of me wishes that they had that kind of control. At least I would know somebody's got, running everything. There have been real conspiracies.
Wait, I want to get to that, but I want you to continue your thought there.
Sorry.
Like, why did I mention this here?
Yeah.
Because
where you were going on that.
Yeah, that's right. So the reason that I'm mentioning this is because I think where we tracked off towards, like you were like, hey, there's this Vietnam situation, which, there's this Iraq situation, and then we kind of pivoted to other, like 9/11.
Well, it's still in theme with the accountability.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really need to. I'm not going to claim that we can advance the conversation about JFK or about 9/11. But when it comes to Iraq, I think this is an example of an open conspiracy. Bob Woodward wrote a book about it. He interviewed all the players in the Bush administration, and they basically said, in effect, this is our goal. Like, the reason we invaded Iraq is because we're invading Iraq.
But why weren't they able to plant weapons of mass destruction?
They didn't need to. I remember watching it. First of all, we had already given him chemical and biological weapons for the war against Iran.
Yeah.
Because Iran's one of their attacks was to put the keys to heaven around the necks of people and run them into gas attacks.
Right. The theory I've heard is that Clinton's bombings in 1998 destroyed most of it. But,
so you could say that. But one of the, it didn't matter if he had them or not, because we knew we gave them to him. So nobody that matters, they're like, he has them. because we gave them to him. We know he has them. Like, stop. You don't need to look for them or find them. Right? So that was like a check. I think actually Biden himself, Joe Biden, I saw him in an interview say this. He was explaining to our allies to get that coalition together. Like they're sitting around a table. And he said, guys, take my watch off, put it on the table. We all get blindfolded. The watch is gone. Do I have to go check all your rooms, all your hotel rooms, check your pockets? Do we need to do an investigation? Somebody in the room took it. My watch is gone. Saddam's guilty. And they were like, oh, okay. We gave him the weapons. He's got them, period. Like that was the level of. And let me just say one more.
I got it, but that's a conspiracy that doesn't require a whole lot of engineering.
But what I'm saying is, it's not, to me, that's not even a conspiracy.
It's just the way of doing things.
It's a small checkbox in the ledger of history. But I want to get to a bigger point here about Iraq. I think it's important in that Bob Woodward book. Part of what they're revealing is they already the persuasion in the mainstream media and across all the allies of the structure of governance, meaning political elected officials, the people that support them at the party level, the people that support them at the financial level, it's called as if. You behave as if what your intentions are fact. It's how I can give other examples, but there's other examples where they're saying they say we are going to proceed as if, and they just did it, and they in interviews they copped to it. They basically said like,
oh yeah,
and it worked.
No, and Cap
and it worked.
And Cap Weinberger convinced America that there was Soviet military superiority, and everybody believed it, and that's how we ended up with jamming up our own military budget. I get that part. But with that, but that's one thing. That's like when you're justifying an invasion and you've got a sort of a conspiracy going about an assumption of something or another. But conspiracies that actually involve physical acts, we know that now that the military medically experimented on soldiers, and I think it was in the 1950s. This was an actual conspiracy with an actual cover-up. I think the people involved were something like 24 or something like that. The reason it broke was because those people, a few of them couldn't keep their mouths shut. They started talking. It got back to them. Reporters found out, and it all blew up. Something like 9/11 would require thousands, if not tens of thousands.
So let me say this: there are over 1 million people in this country that have top secret security clearance. There's 150 million households. How many houses are in any given neighborhood in America? Everybody in their community has people with top secret security clearance. There are 1 million plus people that have, in practice, throughout their entire lives, kept a secret, kept lots of secrets, very important secrets. It's just it's a state of nature in America. And I don't mean to be like emotional about it. I think it's more important to talk about the accountability part. Because like I said, there's render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. I'm not specifically talking about 9/11, nor am I specifically talking about Kennedy assassination. I'm more inclined to talk in this instance,
general stuff.
Saying generally, but also Vietnam. So McNamara goes on TV every night and does the body count thing, where he's saying, "Look at what we did. We took this many," because corporate balance sheets and corporate forecasts. The business school way of analytics of looking at what success is and what progress is, that was applied. He worked for Ford Motor Company. That was applied to the execution of the war in Vietnam. And they said, this is a post-French colonial place that's got, certain problems. And because of the domino theory of containment of Russia, containment of communism, it's a non-negotiable priority that we're going to control who the government of Vietnam is going to be. And so they just did it.
And we only know this because of the Pentagon Papers.
Exactly. Yeah. But that was, technically, there was well, I don't want to get down this road, but there's a Swiss professor who once said, conspiracies when two people collude to keep a secret. That's a conspiracy. You conspired, definitionally. So the question is, how big does it get, and how successful is the containment? But I still think it's important to rotate back to Iraq, because you talked about accountability. And there are lots of people on the left who say, We know the principles. We know the names of those people, like you had said. We know the names of people. Is that me?
Oh, that's me.
Oh.
You can continue.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm going to have to. I've actually got another podcast here after you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I know. Today's going to be a long day.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe we went so far down these rabbit holes, but,
it's all part of the fun.
But the idea is that we're talking about Iraq. We know, again, it's been revealed through publications and quite honestly, I think that they're relatively proud of their accomplishments. And in fact, George Bush made a joke about it and giving a public speech once when he was talking about Russia. And then he said he used the word Iraq instead of Russia. And then he laughed about it. He's like, oops,
Hillary Clinton joking about Gaddafi.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just to put a fine point on it. The idea is that even if it was a conspiracy, air quotes, even if it was stuff it's above our pay grade, as I sort of described, right? Like as a voting person, we don't get to decide. There are things called war crimes, and that we, after World War II, we kind of said, oh, as a United Nations, as a global community of nations, we have these expectations for our leaders, and when they cross these lines, we're going to hold them accountable. And so, I'm not even going to go down that road about other breaches. Let's stick to Iraq. People that are U.S. leaders, here, let's say it this way. The United States is not a party to the criminal court for a reason, because we engage in, behaviors that we don't want our soldiers to have to show up in a criminal court for executing civilian rules executing civilian goals. And we also don't want those civilian leaders. So it's, we intentionally do not have accountability, criminal accountability. So the question is at the ballot box. And if you've got people, a consensus, if you build a consensus,
ever there.
So if you build a consensus around the act itself, then there's not going to be a demand side accountability. So nobody is, to the point, nobody is saying that, I'll just say this, the Republican leaders at the time ought to be held accountable. No, I don't think I've heard anybody, except for a small margin of people on the far left. It's just it's outside. The Overton window does not include accountability for statecraft and international intrigue. And in fact, if you look under the hood, much of our legal system is designed for people that 90+% of all cases settle out of court. It's not like we're holding people accountable. It's that they are doing the cost-benefit analysis and they're kind of buying their way out in some way. In most cases, people are, I'm not going to undermine our whole system here in just some throwaway line at the end of our conversation.
But having to write a check for somebody is a pretty big deal. So,
it's not even writing a check. I mean, accountability is almost a power play, and it's only for people that don't have power. I mean, because even rich people can be held accountable in the end. But if you have power, I don't know that accountability ever really finds you.
Well, I don't know. Mitchell went to jail. McNamara he had consequences for all of that was done in there. People do go to jail, just maybe not the very top.
Well, look at cases like Julian Assange or Snowden. They had some power, but the people above them scapegoated it down. And so the real players,
right.
Nobody ever saw accountability for that.
Which one do you want to talk about more? Because I know we have limited time.
Well, here's what that was a good segue because we could have gone off there. I really want to talk about the election here really fast.
We should do that.
I'm very fascinated. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. We'll have to get you guys back on because I would be interested. I don't know if you guys have followed what is his name? Thomas Matthew Crooks, the attempted assassination of Trump.
Yeah.
I would be fascinated to hear what you guys.
Well, when we went off on conspiracy, I thought that's where we were going next.
I know. I wanted to tie that in a little bit, but more so, I guess for this one to kind of wrap it up is what is going to happen in November. What are your guys' projections? What are you feeling? Seems like there's a lot of steam right now, surprisingly, in some ways, maybe not for others.
No,
behind the Democrats.
Doesn't surprise me. Unless Trump can figure out and get some footing, he's going to lose, and possibly big. He needs to find some way to do it because he's being outplayed everywhere right now. When people compare Kamala Harris's campaign to Obama, they're missing the point. It's more like Reagan. Morning in America, you're depressing. She's like, and she's got that, inflation coming down, winding down, and the interest rates are going to drop in September. So the economy's most likely not going to drop out on her. If Trump, and Trump he is not himself. He doesn't know how to attack her. He goes back to attacking Biden. He attacks her for stupid stuff. Attacks John Kerry completely fell apart over the Swift boating attack. Walz isn't even batting an eye. And when they attack him for stupid things like having a different colored dog on with the same name, and then all they have to do is go back to the original one, and it's debunked. I don't see where it is. People want to vote for her because of the quote unquote joy factor,
which is incredible. I mean, if you can separate emotion out of the current situation.
No, she's playing it. She's playing it like Reagan did.
Insane.
It's morning in America. Things you're looking up. You should be proud of your country. The other side, they're just negative, Nellies. They're not, and that right now is working. Can Trump do something to turn it around? Maybe, but he chose a really bad VP candidate. I mean, it's just horrible.
Yeah, I don't know anything about J.D. Vance.
Well, it's just how he's performing. He goes into a donut shop and just makes a total mess out of trying to start up a conversation with people who don't even want to be on camera. The stupid thing with Arlington Cemetery is a total unforced error, and they should have just apologized and shut up. But they pushed it so hard that they forced this morning the U.S. Army to come out with a statement saying, no, you're not supposed to do political activities there, and yes, you shoved our employee, and that was really obnoxious. I mean, so when you've got the Army making an official statement like that, that's it. And it didn't have to be that way. All they had to do is say, yeah, misunderstanding, we messed up. Sorry for, what our staff did. We'll deal with him, and on to the next, but they can't do that.
But it's almost a perfect series of events that Kamala didn't have to participate in an open primary. She was just ushered in. I mean, the fact that people have forgotten that she ran in 2020 and obviously didn't receive any delegates, but didn't even make it to the first primary because she was so terrible and has been so terrible over the last 4 years, except for the past, what are we saying, the past couple of weeks?
Well, she's been terrible in interviews. Has she been terrible in her performance?
Well, the border czar issue, the fact that they tried to just completely scrub that and say that she was never in charge of the border. Well, that is the Secretary of the Interior that's responsible for it. But the idea that Biden didn't tap her to oversee that is
right. But the fact that she was instrumental in really holding together the coalition against Russia and Ukraine was seen as her ability to do that job. I think also she's just selling that the media narrative is always wrong. That they're the ones that are doing it. But look at me now. Look at what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And then she focuses on her prosecution record.
Which is, first off, terrible.
No, it's not.
No, but you
mean the over heavy-handedness of it.
No, I mean the fact that she, as, acting as this prosecutor, she withheld evidence as the DA because she wanted people to fight fires in California. You would think that alone, which it was in 2020 when Tulsi Gabbard brought it up on the debate stage, that was enough to completely implode her campaign. The fact that her staff turnover is something like 92%.
I don't know if that's true. I see the claim of it, but she's got the vibes. The reason she was elected to DA over Terrence Hallinan, which I still think is a crime because Terrence Hallinan was kind of a hero of mine, and I'll always hold that against her. But she did it because she knew what cases to take to trial and what to not. And when she did go in trial, she won. She got the conviction almost every time. That's why she was the superstar then. And that's what she does. If she can prosecute something, I mean, in that first debate, one thing she did well was just clobber Joe Biden. about his racist past. Said, I know you're not a racist, but here's all the reasons you're a racist, right? That's where Biden apparently says, I need her on my team. Look at her.
Well, then comes out and says, what interview was that when she says, oh, it was just a debate. I didn't mean what I said. Why would I say something that I mean?
I mean, what she's saying is that, we bring up the hard things and we put it into a specific context. But yeah, she went after him. I mean, it was...
it's just baffling watching it all play out to me. So I don't understand it. This party that is supposedly the beacon of democracy and fighting for that doesn't hold an open primary, basically crowns the VP. And where is Joe Biden in all of this? He has one disastrous debate where everybody is questioning it was mental just the one debate. But that was definitely the nail in the coffin.
So I was looking for the angle. I was trying to figure out what part of the election we ought to be talking about.
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many.
So is it ones. Like, are we going to look at like you said, what happens in November? I don't think you're actually wanting to, like, it doesn't sound like that's what we're really focused on. We're focused, like, right now, like, I see your wheels turning. It's like, how did this happen?
Yeah,
really?
How are we in this spot where it does seem like Kamala Harris might actually win?
She's going to win.
We're gonna have to have another show.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think this is important because, like I said, one of my I alluded to it earlier. Like, I talked to conservatives, I talked to Republicans, talked to people I grew up with my whole life. We have a rapport, we trust each other. And he said, "You're a delegate." And then to be fair, Eric and I are both delegates to the California Democratic Party and representing our community here, from Sebastopol down in Sonoma. All the way up to the Oregon border, Trinity, out to the Trinity.
The 707 district.
Yeah, 707. And I can't speak for Eric, but for myself, I'm there because the Democrats, this is California, they control the policies. This is how we get a seat at the table. We get to see how the sausage is made. I personally became a delegate for that reason, to be closer, to better understand how things work, right? So my friend said, "You're a delegate. How did this happen?" And I said, well, let's start with, it's really difficult to impress upon you enough, someone we trust each other, that I didn't see Biden's decline as clearly as other people saw it. That's sort of like a preface to this. But looking in hindsight, everything that I see and have read and have heard, people around him, his inner circle, have known for 18 months that he's experiencing, immense levels of decline, cognitive decline. And many of those people, this is Bob Woodward, right? This is not Bob Woodward, the other one, Carl Bernstein. He said he interviewed family and friends, and this is what he found. It's public, it's out there. He said at least a dozen times or a dozen and a half times over the last year, people have come forward to the inner circle and said, don't let him run again. Like, this is not good for him. This is not good for his legacy. But the White House is insular and said, no, we got this. We we got this. And then as it got closer and closer and closer to the present, and as the debate came up, it got to be obviously in the limelight, in the spotlight. At the debate, it was unequivocally true, 100% true. Every person in the world who watched it knows not fit to be president for 4 years. No offense, but that's the observation, that's the impression that came through. So the word on the street, this is out there again. It's like, we don't know this because we're delegates. We know this because we read. That Obama's team, his like Pod Save America guys, started coming out, leaking some things and saying some things, and there was ripples of insider dissent that started a momentum wave, and that Obama, as sort of the elder statesman, not in charge of the party, but everybody loves and respects him and his legacy and his skills and his team of people. Because Joe Biden was his vice president, right? So they're close, so they're as close as you can be, and so that the ultimate nail in the coffin after the wave of, hey, maybe we should, we ought to, maybe we could, that Obama was putting out there, and people like him in his camp, that we ought to have an open convention, and that anybody who wants to step up and be president, make your case. And so some people were saying, well, we should have like a series of events where people do like town halls and they get asked about policy and we kind of hash it out openly in public. But again, what ended up happening is nobody wanted to cut in line in front of Kamala Harris for lots of reasons, some practical, but more just in alignment with, I think, some degree of pragmatism.
I think Gavin Newsom's really pissed.
Yeah, but and that's out there now too. Finally, yeah. But the truth is that there could have been an open convention. There could have been somebody, if anybody was willing to step up and buck the party, they were allowed to do so. That was all floated out there. But in fact, everybody agreed that for the higher principle was to look unified, and that that's why they said, you know what, we better just vote on this before we even get to the convention. We have the delegates, the whatever 3,000+ delegates are all going to get. So they started calling everybody, all the delegates, right? And they said, is there a reason why you wouldn't vote for X? Is there, then they did like whole whipping of the votes of the delegates. And then it came to the point where it was like, okay, well, we think this is going to happen. Actually, live on Eric's show, the Thursday before they stepped down, before Biden removed his name from consideration, I had an hour between an event I was at and being a guest on his show, because Eric's like, let's talk about this. What's happening, right? I just looked up like Semaphore and Axios and just a couple, just to just get some ideas to talk about on the show. And then there was this, Halpern release that said, I'll just cut to the chase. Historian Robert Meacham will be at Biden's residence this weekend writing the speech for him and the letter for him to just opt out. So as it was released, we were live on the radio. And we said, oh, he's going to step down this weekend. Like the Thursday before. And the reason was, the real reason was this: the data about not just the presidential election outcome itself, but also all the elections. So how's it going to affect the balance of power in the Senate? How's it going to affect the balance of power in the House? How's it going to affect state elections, local elections? There's 3,000 and change counties in America. The Democratic DNC, the people that pay for the data, the best data, right? They see that, you see an up arrow if your trends are up. You see a down arrow if your trends are down, right? So little red up arrows, they called them mushrooms. They said these little red mushrooms were popping up everywhere. Purple districts, places that maybe you're going to go this way, maybe you're going to go that way. Everywhere, Trump was gaining, Republicans were gaining. The data was insurmountably clear. So that there was a call made, Nancy Pelosi. This is all well documented. Nancy Pelosi calls the Biden team and says, Joe, dude, I forgot his name off the top of my head, but your inside guy with your data who's telling you that you're fine. I hear you, Joe, that you're fine. Put your guy on. And she's like, I need to know what it is you're looking at, that you're showing him, because we see something completely different. The charade was up. The insularity, whatever, was burst. That bubble was burst. And so that's when he stepped down within days of the emperor having no clothes, so to speak, moment, when it came to, they ran the risk of losing everything. They already lost the Supreme Court.
We also had
it would have been everything
on that show. That we learned on Access Humboldt interview earlier that day.
That's right.
Huffman had said that he's endorsing Kamala Harris.
That's right.
We knew at that point he would not have done that if the writing wasn't on the wall. That was Thursday before the Sunday that he did. Now, apparently he was having some second thoughts and saying, maybe I will stay into this, but Well,
that was my understanding, was that he was adamant he was going to stay in and essentially pushed out by, Pelosi and Obama.
Well,
he said God. He said, if God tells me to step down, I'll step down. Well, it wasn't God, but it was the whole party.
He woke up Sunday morning and realized that they were still campaigning for him even.
Well, his staff
they called Meacham Thursday to spend the weekend with the family.
Right.
And be like, hey, family, I'm going to coach you through this. This is a patriotic thing to do.
Yeah.
Your legacy would be cemented if you do this.
So you don't think that there's any credence to the idea that it was under threat of the 25th, that he decided to step in. You don't buy into
I don't think
there's no evidence.
There's no evidence of it.
Well, there's definitely reporting that there was pressure.
He would still,
right?
even if he wasn't president, he would still have to willingly give up the nomination.
Correct.
So it doesn't matter. So if they did that, then what difference does it make?
He could still run for president,
right?
Even if he got forced out of office,
right?
But if you're currently the sitting president and your own party is turning against you, threatening to invoke the 25th.
No, I think
unless you step down.
I think they were just they first of all, it wouldn't have meant much, and they would have lost anyway if they were going to do that.
Oh, guys, I am so sorry. My schedule today is just...
All right.
I'll just say it's one of those things where, like we talked about with all these others, like if it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, let's assume it's a duck until we see evidence to the contrary. And it seems like he was cornered, not driven out.
See, I'm feeling like we've got a lot of chickens pretending to be ducks. We're all just like, what is happening here? We're gonna have to do another show.
I mean, it was the donors. The donors were all pulling out. They canceled, things. I mean, there was a lot going on. It was a cascade.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is the group that stuck with them were the progressives, the Squad, and Bernie Sanders and the rest. But I think that they just wanted to not be seen as somebody going after the president. They've got enough other issues and the rest, and they probably weren't in all that loop. But it's just, it's ironic. But no, it was. The writing was on the wall that Thursday. Huffman would not have done it if they didn't know that if it wasn't almost a done deal. But reportedly, Biden had a last minute Saturday night, impulse to push back and say, you know what, maybe I'll stay in. And they worked on him. And then Sunday morning.
Yeah, I think they worked on him pretty well. That's what my fear.
But I think if there's a campaign of pressure and coercion, if the 25th thing to me that doesn't matter as much as the result.
Yeah. The other thing is, even with that disability, that's not necessarily grounds for 25th.
I think that he is far enough gone that if people actually, I don't know, you would say, had respect for the seat of office, I think it would have been invoked a long time ago.
If you actually read the transcript of that disastrous debate for him, he doesn't come off that bad. He just couldn't communicate it. He couldn't speak loud, and he was rambling a few times. But if you look at the substance of the debate and you read it, it was pretty bad. It was really good.
It was pretty bad.
I'm not going to defend the debate performance.
It was pretty bad. I respect you for trying to defend it, but that was...
believe me, that was the moment. 3 minutes into the debate, I said, he needs to be removed as the candidate. I'm not defending his performance. I'm just saying that the contents, when you actually read the policy discussions that nobody could hear because he couldn't get the voice out, it doesn't read that bad. You watch it and it's like insanely bad.
Oh yeah, if you completely take it out of context and just look at words on a piece of paper, yeah,
it's not that.
But
bad.
Anybody could look good if you.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But the point is that it wasn't that he didn't understand the concepts. He was just rambling and he couldn't get it out. He couldn't talk loud enough. You couldn't even hear half the time. And then the lack of focus. I mean, the mistake they made was having Trump cut off. That's why Trump doesn't want.
I think that was great. Great for Trump.
Yeah,
to mute the mic,
because if he was interrupting,
so we got to wrap this up.
All right,
you guys. Do you want have it?
Well, I'll say two quick things, super quick. One is I said this on one of our shows. I was actually impressed with Trump's discretion in that debate at just kind of like saying, like, you all see what's happening.
Let him hang himself.
He didn't pounce. And I think that goes against anything that you might be critical of him as being an sort of opportunistic bully.
Yeah, not measured.
Yeah, he didn't see blood in the water. Like, that was actually respectable to do that. And I want to like give him props for that. I think that was the right thing to do. But I think you said maybe 25th Amendment, right? When Biden was in that interview, when he was talking about the NATO topics, it was a few days before that, I think. Or no, that was after when they were like, hey, can he save, whenever it was, the NATO interview where he's like, can he save himself? He actually was pretty articulate on some pretty complicated foreign policy issues. It's because of like, I know I've experienced enough senior citizens where their long-term memory is actually really good. It's just that as they get really old and they're like cognitive decline starts, sometimes that the more immediate stuff or like
are you guys aware of the Her report at all?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. I would recommend looking into that. That was an interesting case, and I think that provides context onto his mental faculties. And if you take that into account with the debate performance and everything in between, obviously, but
yeah,
it's a pretty damning indication that he is not. I mean, I don't know how you say that he is fit to be president at that level.
Yeah. No,
he's an old guy. He's had major brain surgery.
Yeah.
I mean, he's clearly not all there. He deserves to live out his last few days or months.
There's old and there's old. Bernie Sanders is older than him, but he's still doing basketball layups. And
there are a lot of complaints about Trump.
Trump is starting to lose it too. That's why I think he's just turning out to be a bad candidate. Great candidate in that debate, by the way, and leading into it. Since then, he's off the walls. Can he pull it together and do a good performance in the debate that he doesn't want to do? Maybe, but I don't think even that'll turn it around at this point. I mean, the momentum, when we talk about the momentum, people want to vote for her because they want to be happy. I mean, it's a weird thing.
Me.
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
That's our episode too.
Yeah, all right. Absolutely. Do you guys want to plug where people can find you, where they can find your shows, all your stuff?
Access Humboldt, we're on YouTube.
Do you want to get on your mic there?
Oh, sure. Access Humboldt, we're on YouTube. We're also on the radio, was it 96.7? I should know that.
KZZH.
KZZH, and also on Channel 12, Access Television. And you can hear us both on our K-Mud shows. I do my All Things Reconsidered the third Thursday of the month. And you do your...
I do my show called You Are Here on the first Thursday of each month.
So it's and that's at 5:00, right?
Mine's at 5.
Mine's at 7. I mean, you look us up, you can find us. It's pretty much there, and so yeah, I think that's pretty much says it. Like I said, just like you, we got a YouTube channel, and it's always interesting the feedback we get. I'll be curious to see what kind of feedback I get for this one.
We went super philosophical there for a while. Then we got to the practical at the end. So let's start with practical next time, because I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I personally appreciate you. We just met today. I think this is cool. I like this format. I like this forum. I like your insights and probing questions. And I think this is great. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming on. It was a blast.
All right.
Awesome.
Talk to you later.